We thought on Super Bowl Eve that instead of the standard rally, we'd actually chat with you all for a little while. And let me just start and say, there's one story that came out today on somewhere that I just want to put to rest, hopefully for the next few months. I am a candidate for President of the United States. I will be a candidate for President of the United States. We will go to Tampa. We have over 160,000 donors, 97% of whom have given less than $250. We have an obligation to them to stand up for their values, their concerns, and the reason they've gotten involved. We will leave on Monday to go to Denver, and then to Minneapolis, and then we will go on to, I think, 4 cities in Ohio, and we will continue the campaign all the way to Tampa. I think actually this week several things have clarified themselves that are very helpful. Unlike Governor Romney, I care very deeply about helping the poorest Americans. I believe that the Declaration of Independence's commitment that our Creator endowed us with the right to pursue happiness extends to the poorest of Americans, and I think one of the great challenges to conservatism is to turn the safety net into a trampoline to give people an opportunity to achieve real status, earning a living, buying a house, having a decent future. So I'm not comfortable, as Governor Romney said he was, with simply allowing people to languish in the safety net, and I think that that's a very fundamental difference between the two of us. I also believe that his proposal for indexing minimum wage is a bad idea which will increase unemployment, and every evidence we have is it would increase unemployment. And if you're in a state like Nevada, which has some 32% teenage unemployment, if you're in a country which has 43% black teenage unemployment, maybe you shouldn't be, in fact, suggesting a capricious increase on an automatic basis of a minimum wage which kills jobs and stops access for young people. So there are some very big differences evolving in this campaign as we move forward. I also believe that the vast majority of Republicans across the country are going to want an alternative to a Massachusetts moderate who has, in his career, been pro-abortion, pro-gun control, pro-tax increase, and who ranked 3rd from the bottom in creating jobs in the 4 years he was governor. So I suspect this debate will continue for a long time. Our commitment is to seek to find a series of victories which, by the end of the Texas primary, will leave us about at parity with Governor Romney, and from that point forward to see if we can't actually win the nomination. Tonight, he will do reasonably well. This is one of his best states. It is a very heavily Mormon state, and a state which he carried in 2008. I think that we have early returns. We don't know yet how it's going to end up. The last time around, Ron Paul was in 2nd place. Anytime we're in a caucus state, Dr. Paul has a substantial advantage. I think I will do better than John McCain did 3 years ago. We will get some delegates here. Obviously, we'd like to get more. But we're very happy to be competing here, and we're going to move on to compete first in Maine, Minnesota, Colorado. Early voting has already begun in Ohio and in Arizona, and we'll be competing later this month in Arizona and in Michigan, and we'll go on to Super Tuesday and then beyond that. So I just wanted to sort of set that so all of you could relax. We could. What happens is every primary day or caucus day, the Romney headquarters in Boston sends out the rumor that they believe I will withdraw, which is, of course, their greatest fantasy. I'm not going to withdraw. I'm actually pretty happy with where we are, and I think the contrast between Governor Romney and me is going to get wider and wider and clearer over the next few weeks. And so I look forward very much to opportunities to debate him, opportunities to draw the contrast, and opportunities to compete for votes. And I'll be glad to take your questions.
Very intensely with financial advisors and strategic advisors. We haven't seen you a lot, in public appearances. What
did you miss me?
We did.
Thank you. I feel better. I was worried that you would not have noticed.
What kinds of conversations took place, and what are some of the conclusions that came out?
Well, we got together for a very practical reason. I was surprised by the degree to which the establishment has closed ranks and made quite clear that they're desperate over the prospect of a Gingrich presidency. I was surprised by George Soros cheerfully explaining in Davos that he was happy with either Obama or Romney because it didn't make much difference in policy. It was just a change of personality. And I was surprised at the New York Times article on the Romney campaign's decision that they had to destroy Newt Gingrich. And so we stopped and said, all right, if this is the objective reality of the campaign, the entire establishment will be against us. The scale of Wall Street money, starting with Goldman Sachs, will be amazing. And the campaign will be based on things that aren't true. Then how do you define the campaign for the average American so they get to choose that? Do they want 2 George Soros-approved candidates in the general election? Or would they like a conservative versus 1 George Soros-approved candidate? And we frankly spent the last 4 days laying out a campaign for the next few months in which, although we will be outspent, we think we can communicate through the clutter, and we think we'll be able to draw decisively for the American people how big the difference is. You know, Reagan had this challenge with John Connally. Goldwater had this challenge with Nelson Rockefeller. We've had past Republican campaigns in which the establishment had massive financial advantages. Reagan lost 5 straight primaries before he began winning in 1976. I'm pretty comfortable that when you come down to it, as we go state to state to state, a pro-abortion, pro-gun control, pro-tax increase, George Soros-approved candidate of the establishment probably is not going to do very well. And I'm happy to have that debate with Governor Romney, and I will debate him one-on-one, anywhere, anytime that he's willing to stand up and explain his record without the kind of gimmicks he used in Florida.
Speaker, you seem to be looking past
No,
the
wait,
February.
right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Wait, I'm going to go to Alex, then come to you.
Mr. Speaker.
Everybody will get a chance. The Super Bowl's not until 3:29. That is not an offer of a really long session. Go ahead.
There are reports that Sheldon Adelson has been meeting with Mitt Romney and has said that he will, help him financially.
Who has?
Sheldon.
I have no idea.
Would that bother you if he is talking to Mitt
Well,
Romney?
first of all, I think what he's quoted as saying is that if I dropped out, he would be willing to support Governor Romney. And I've said myself, if the choice is Obama and Romney, then there's no choice. I think that's how Sheldon Adelson feels. Look, Sheldon's primary driving force is the survival of the United States and Israel in the face of an Iranian nuclear weapon. And compared to Barack Obama, virtually anybody is a better candidate. So that doesn't bother me at all. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, you seem to be looking past the February states and really aiming at Super Tuesday. How much of your focus in the next couple of weeks is going to be on Super Tuesday states? You're obviously spending a lot of time in Ohio this week. Can you lay out what the next month will mean in terms of a Super Tuesday strategy?
Well, one of the things that some of you, as you keep score, don't quite follow me on is I actually think we're a national system in terms of information flow. So I think if I'm on Hannity, or if I happen to be an Associated Press, to take an example, or if I'm on one of the networks, or even in the New York Times, that in fact it reaches the whole country. So I run a campaign which twice now has made me the front runner, and I suspect will again by the Texas primary or so, that really is a national campaign. I think next week, this coming week, we're in Colorado, Minnesota, and Ohio, and then we do CPAC in Washington. I think the following Monday we start 3 days in California. So we're going to be all over the place again and again and again, but we intend to compete in every single state in the country, and I think you can count on us being competitive in every single state in the country. Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, just yesterday Nancy Pelosi came out and said that she stands with her fellow Catholics in favor of President Obama's decision on the conscience clause stuff.
She stands with her fellow Catholics.
That's what she said. I was wondering what your response
Her
was.
fellow Catholics, meaning Archbishop Dolan, the entire hierarchy, every bishop, every priest. Those are her fellow Catholics?
She says.
You might go and ask Archbishop Dolan whether or not he thinks that the term fellow Catholic applies to Archbishop Dolan. Yes, sir.
Just considered also.
Let me go back for a second. As I say to you, the Obama administration has declared war on religious freedom in this country, and people need to understand that. This is a decision so totally outrageous and an illustration of such radical secular ideology that I believe the entire hierarchy will oppose it every inch of the way, and it has nothing to do with the specific details. It has to do with whether or not the government of the United States can tell a religious institution, you must give up your religious beliefs. Now, that's what Obamacare has come to mean. The right of a Washington politician and a Washington bureaucrat to tell you that you may no longer worship God the way you want unless you're willing to pay a penalty for doing so. And I think as the average American comes to understand that, they will be repulsed at the arrogance and the anti-religious bigotry of the Obama administration. Yes, back in there.
Mr. Speaker, have you considered also that perhaps voters just aren't buying what you're selling? I mean, you've been on the ballot now in 5 states. You've won 1, but you've lost 4. And you also talk about debates, but you've had 18 of them, and generally you've been considered to have done well in them, and still it's not showing up in the polls. Is it just people aren't buying?
It showed up pretty well in a lot of places. I'm not going to defend the outcome in a state where I was outspent 5-1. And I suggest you're sophisticated enough, you understand that the idea of taking a state where the other guy spent 5 times as much money and many of his ads were false, as described by both the Wall Street Journal and National Review, that maybe that's not a very accurate measure. When it was an entirely positive campaign, up through mid-December, I was ahead by 12 points in Gallup. It would have come back again, and I was actually ahead in Gallup about a week ago. So I think in a few more weeks I'll be ahead in Gallup again.
Isn't that just ignoring the reality of the campaign? I mean, he has gone negative, and it's working, and, you know, you're...
Right. So the reality of the campaign, to use your words, he has gone negative, and it is working. And what I'm asserting to you is, over time, I don't believe the American people will approve of a campaign which actually suppresses turnout. I think it's amazing if you go look at Florida. Every county I carried in Florida had an increased turnout. Every county Romney carried in Florida had a decreased turnout. Now that should sober every Republican in the country. If the only way Romney wins is suppressing turnout, how is he going to do that in the fall? If the only way he wins is outspending somebody 5-1, how's that going to apply to a campaign against Obama who's going to outspend him? I just suggest to you that there are underlying factors in this race, and I'm quite happy to continue campaigning, and I'm kind of mildly amazed at the news media's desperation for finding some excuse to say, wouldn't you please quit this evening? Jeff?
Speaker, even if you can be successful going forward, if Mitt Romney is still in your head the way he is right now, and he has been for the last week?
Well, first of all, I'm not sure that Mitt Romney's in my head. I mean, I think that's an interesting analysis on your part, and I'm sure that with a psychiatric degree that will get you a tremendous opportunity to have new clients. I think there's a clear contrast. I think that the clear contrast is really important. And I think that over time we're going to drive home that clear contrast in a way which will be enormously to his disadvantage. I think the American people want somebody who is genuinely conservative, who is prepared to change Washington. just take his one comment this week about not caring about the poor, which we know was a mistake, just as his comment about liking to fire people was a mistake, etc. I would suggest to you that a conservative who cares about the poor, a conservative who cares about every American of every background, a conservative who says, why don't we rethink the entire safety net so it becomes a trampoline, which is not me, it's Jack Kemp. It's a whole range of people who've been working on these ideas for 25 years. And as Charles Krauthammer said, Romney's comments this week were a sign that he doesn't quite understand conservative philosophy. Now, I think that's important for the country, for Republicans, for conservatives to think about. Nominating one more moderate, like 1996 when we lost badly, like 2008 when we lost badly, I don't think that's a very good future for the Republican Party. And because it's vital to defeat Barack Obama, I don't think it's a very good future for the country. Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. I can follow up the
Last week you said you're I'm sorry, Jeff, you had a follow-up, sorry.
In terms of how you've dealt with him, though, in the debates, do you plan to deal with him differently going forward?
Yes. I was surprised. Go back and look at the second debate. I've never had a person stand next to me in a civil engagement and be as substantially dishonest as he was. I mean, go look at what he said. You had Larry Sabato in the middle of the debate tweeting that Romney was being factually false. Now, I didn't have any good mechanisms, I will by the next debate, I didn't have any good mechanisms to turn to somebody who was being blatantly dishonest to the entire country as a candidate for president. If you can't tell the truth as a candidate for president, which is, by the way, a charge that has been made by McCain, by Fred Thompson, by Huckabee, if you can't tell the truth as a candidate for president, how can the country possibly expect you to lead as president? And I frankly was stunned. I make no bones about this. In the second Florida debate, I had nothing to say because I had never before seen a person who I thought of as a serious candidate for president be that fundamentally dishonest. And it was blatant, and it was deliberate, and he knew he was doing it. I don't want to tell you now. Please, Jeff, you have to give us a few trade secrets. Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned that Romney wins Nevada because of the strong Mormon population here, but entrance poll shows he won in every demographic almost, except for a couple that Ron Paul won. Aren't you kind of belittling his?
No, I think this is a state he won last time. I think we will do better than John McCain did last time, and John McCain went on to a reasonably good success. Yes, ma'am.
News reports today suggest that you had a greater involvement with Freddie Mac.
I haven't seen the reports. I have no idea what they refer to, and I'll be happy to look at them. Yes, sir.
Last night you said you're ashamed of the negativity of this campaign. First, have you engaged yourself in any negativity in this campaign? And are you willing to commit to give up any negativity for the remainder of this?
You can't unilaterally disarm in a world where somebody is willing to be as aggressive. What?
If you're ashamed of it, why not?
Because, as you know, as a realistic person, you might as well withdraw from the campaign. Now, that's a fact.
You don't think you could win this campaign with a purely positive
No,
message?
I tried that, and any of you who were with me in Iowa saw it. I stayed relentlessly positive in Iowa, and I lost 22 points. When we were in a totally positive campaign, I was beating Romney by a huge margin.
So you're ashamed of it, but you're going to go as
I
negative as you
think
need
it's
to be.
terrible. Yes, I think it's terrible that the American system is reduced to negative ads, some of them false. I wish it wasn't happening, and I think we would be better serving our children and grandchildren if it wasn't happening. But it's a fact. It is a fact. And unfortunately, it's a fact, and if you're not willing to stand and fight, then you have to get out of the race, and I think that's a very sad comment. Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Speaker, some sources have suggested that you've decided you want to go more positive in the tone, but that doesn't really seem to match your news conference. So is that true, and what do you want to see about the tone moving forward?
Well, I think we're going to make a whole series of positive speeches. And again, I'm perfectly happy to talk about the idea of turning the safety net into a trampoline. I'm perfectly happy to talk about ideas we have for creating a much better future in terms of tax cuts and less regulation. I gave an entire speech last night at a local church, which was a positive statement about American exceptionalism and the nature of America, and I'm very happy to do that. I also predict to you that it is relatively harder to get your profession to cover totally positive speeches. So I can give hours and hours of totally positive speeches. That doesn't mean they'll necessarily show up anywhere. What?
Is it a positive message about America's future, but negative about Mitt Romney? Is that the plan?
Well, I think the point is there is a positive future for America if we elect a conservative. And I'm happy to talk about why that's true, and I'm happy to talk about why I think it's very, very hard for somebody who invented Romney Care to be part of that future. Yes, ma'am.
Do you think that the mistaken articles about Trump endorsing you were maliciously or in any way intended?
What?
The articles that mistakenly said that Trump would endorse you, do you think that wasn't intended in any way? And are you hoping for any other endorsements?
I couldn't understand those articles when they came out because nobody I knew thought he was going to endorse me. We all thought it was kind of weird. And those of you who wrote those articles ought to go back to your sources and ask why they misinformed you. But it's a free country. Look, there are few people better at manipulating the press than Donald Trump, and he proved it once again. You have to admire the sheer chutzpah. Yes, ma'am.
You hear the fact that you don't use political consultants in your campaign. The explanation that we've gotten many times is that you are the brains and the machine behind your campaign. You talked about not responding quickly enough to Governor Romney. Do you think that if you would have had consultants, it would have been different? And are you looking at adding consultants moving forward?
No, it wouldn't have been different. Because first of all, how is a consultant going to train you in advance and say to you in advance? I mean, until I saw the New York Times article about the discussion they had last Sunday morning, it hadn't occurred to me that you would have the level of ruthlessness and the level of dishonesty we saw last week. And I've been around a long time. I've been through a fair number of campaigns and a fair number of fights. And the language in that article is startling, and I think, frankly, a break with the American tradition. Yes, sir. What?
Is it fair to say you are running your campaign, that you're your own campaign manager?
Well, no, I think Michael Kroll is the campaign manager. We have a lot of really smart people. But it's fair to say that when it comes to what the candidate does and what the candidate says, that I bear full responsibility. I don't get talking points. I don't get coaching in the sense that apparently Governor Romney did until they fired the guy who was coaching him, which I think is, by the way, pretty bizarre. I mean, here you have a guy who comes in and does a pretty good job. The only 2 debates Romney's done well, he was coached by this guy. And then they fire him? Makes just kind of weird. You're the last question. Last question.
You've talked about difficulties in running a campaign when you're outspent 5 to 1. Reports are coming out that your campaign is still about $600,000 in debt. Can you discuss the finances of the campaign?
Yeah, I don't understand where that report came from because it doesn't fit our internal numbers and it doesn't fit, I mean, some clever person went back and jury-rigged their interpretation of the last 30 days.
And secondly, you talk about running in all these states until the convention. You're not on the ballot in Virginia. How bad?
Well, that's the one state we frankly messed up in. And I've been pretty honest about that. We did the wrong thing, hired the wrong person, it didn't work. But we'll be in 49 states and the territories, and we'll be very, very competitive in all of them. Listen, I hope you all have a great Super Bowl. Take a few hours off from politics. Try to enjoy life. Thank you very much. This is really important. Forget all this other junk, okay? Paul Lubbers, my son-in-law, who's from Sheboygan, who for Christmas gave my daughter 1 share of Packer stock. He and I each own 1 share. We had a serious conference call, and we concluded that we should be for the team that beat the Pack. Now, it's painful, but I am for the Giants, period. There you go.